I mean, I'm just going to straight up say that. When I said that, along with others, like the director of the CIA and chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, we thought Russia was going to war. Russia didn't go to war. Russia carried out a special military operation. It took us a while to figure out what the hell that was. And once we did, we realized that we're dealing with something totally different, and we have to readjust all the algorithms that we use for war. And I did. In fact, if you remember, Danny, back in April and May, when the United States promised $48 billion injection of funding to Ukraine, I said, this is a game changer. Scott, you're flip-flopping. I'm not flip-flopping. I'm identifying a new reality. $48 billion worth of military assistance changes the nature of this game. And now it's going to be extended, and Russia's going to have to respond. And Russia did, and that changed the game. And we've been looking at the back-and-forth game. But one thing that hasn't changed is that Russia has retained the strategic initiative throughout, and that Russia's winning, not just against Ukraine, but against the collective West. 1993, George Soros wrote an article where he said that it's inevitable that NATO will go to war with Russia. Inevitable. 1993. So all the people out there saying NATO wasn't looking for war, 1993, NATO was looking for war. But he said that it won't be a war that NATO fights directly with Russia because NATO's, European societies can't handle the body bags coming home. That NATO will have to find a source of Eastern European manpower and provide them with technology, with weapons. Well, that's what's happening today. Ukraine is the source of Eastern European manpower, and NATO is supplying it with technology and weapons and funding. And now we're into a gigantic war of attrition, where Russia is, being compelled to basically terminate the DNA, the DNA reservoir of Ukraine. Ukraine will never be the same. Ukraine will never recover from this war. Ukraine has lost so many men; it will never recover from this war. Ukraine is a dead nation, not just a dying nation. They're dead. It's we've passed the point where Ukraine can be revived. It's a dead nation. It's a fake nation. It's a false nation, propped up by Western support, Western money, Western funding, etc. But Russia's not just fighting Ukraine. Russia's fighting the collective West, the United States, Europe, the economic potential of all. People tend to forget that Europe has a much larger population than Russia, and Europe has a much larger gross domestic product. That Russia is fighting from an inferior position and winning. People never focus on that. Russia is outproducing the defense industrial potential of the collective West, inclusive of the United States. And their forces are burning through Western stockpiles. People keep saying, "Oh, Russia ran out of tanks." I don't think the Russians are the one that ran out of tanks. When was the last time Germany deployed delivered a Leopard 4 to Ukraine? A long time ago, because Russia killed them all. The Russians are still producing a lot of T-80s, T-90s. They may even resume production of the T-14 once they, get the drone issue. Once they develop technologies that make maneuver viable in the current drone reality. But the fact of the matter is that Russia has done a hell of a job here. Vladimir Putin, everybody's critical of him. I was at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. I actually got a great seat. I was in the second row of the plenary session. So got to see the bead of sweat on Vladimir Putin's forehead. I'm joking. He didn't sweat. But the point is, the speech that he delivered didn't make any mention of the war whatsoever. None. And this is right after Star Bells, 21 murdered students. This is after a Ukrainian drone attack on the opening day of St. Petersburg Forum. And you thought that it would, that this would dominate. Everybody thought. I thought he'd come up there and just be breathing fire and brimstone. It was time to, shoot the dog. But he didn't. He said, no, my focus is the economy. My focus is Russia. My focus is the growth and the development of the welfare of all Russians. He did talk about the war, and he basically said that it will be continued until we win on our terms. But he's not letting the war define this. And people tend to forget, because there's people out there right now. I mean, you know him, Dr. Rowe, my favorite septuagenarian, who's basically saying that, Vladimir Putin is under pressure, that the military is ready to revolt, and that. Vladimir Putin under pressure? I mean, what, his approval rating went from 81 to 78? Western politicians would kill for 78% approval rating. Kill. This man is under no political threat whatsoever inside Russia. Are there people upset? Sure. There's always going to be people upset. doesn't mean that they're going to be screaming for a Maidan moment in Moscow anytime soon. There are people who say that Vladimir Putin should strike more decisively, but they forget that he's winning the war. I mean, this is the one thing people tend to forget. Everybody who says, let's bomb Europe tomorrow, including me, has to stop and take pause and ask the question, then what? Because if you bomb Europe tomorrow, you run the chance of expanding a conflict that you're winning. Why do you want to change the algorithm of attrition that you're winning? Because some bloggers are pissed off that, Ukraine gets to publish propaganda that resonates in the West. It's an echo chamber. All Gilbert Doctorow doing is echoing Western propaganda and echoing it back and breathing life into it. But the reality is Vladimir Putin, as you saw, is it having an effect? Yes, but Russia will adapt. Russia will adjust. And Russia will not stop doing what it's doing, which is winning this war. And at some point in time, that urban belt that you showed, Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, is going to fall. And when it falls, that's the end of the Donbass. Russia occupies it. When the Donbass breaks, the Ukrainian army breaks, and we begin a cascading effect of collapse. And that's it. When's it going to happen, Scott? I don't know. The other fiction out there is that the Russians have put timelines out there. Vladimir Putin has missed 15 self-imposed deadlines and timelines. There's been no timelines. I challenge anybody to find me one statement from the Russian government that says the Russian army needs to do this by this date. Hasn't happened. The Russians aren't looking at the calendar. The Russians are looking at, objectives. Accomplish this objective, that objective. And that's what's driving this war. And it drives people in the West crazy because the people in the West want things to happen on a calendar. And if it doesn't happen on a calendar, then they determine, victory or defeat. Ladies and gentlemen, Russia doesn't operate on the Western calendar. Russia doesn't give a damn about the Western calendar. If you go to Melitopol, you'll understand the only calendar they care about is the calendar of their own personal reality. That personal reality is to get up in the morning and do what you need to do to survive. And hopefully you make it through the day. Then you go to bed at night, you wake up the next morning, you do the same thing. And you keep doing that day after day after day until the war is over. And the war, if the war doesn't end the way you want it, then the war continues. That's the other thing people don't understand. They just aren't going to quit. Anybody who thinks that Russia is going to quit, you haven't been to Russia and you don't know the Russians. Gilbert Doctorow has been to Russia, but he's talking to the wrong people. I think, hey, Gil, let's talk about it. You're in Brussels, right? Sort of like NATO territory. How much contact do you have with the MI6? I mean, are you echoing their talking points? Because it sure seems like you are. Sure seems like you're playing into the game book that's being written by MI6, Moscow House in London Station. And I think that's exactly what Gilbert Doctorow is doing, whether he knows it or not. It's a 100% guarantee that Gilbert Doctorow is being used by Western intelligence to feed this absurd propaganda that Russia's losing, that Putin's under pressure, and that the military is about to quit. Gil, go visit the Donbass and come back and tell me Russia's about to quit. There ain't no quit in Russia.
And Scott, so to your point about Russian approval of Vladimir Putin, the Levada Center, it's a very interesting graph about given the dates when you look at from the beginning of his tenure as Russian president in 2000, and then, of course, subsequent elections. But you see quite a lot of variation here. But one thing that is quite certain is that approval rating has dramatically increased since the Ukraine conflict began. And yes, it has gone down a bit, but that's relative to these massive numbers. I mean, 88% 2025, 80% all through, and then now 79%. So not
79. It's a collapse.
I know. Yeah, it's like not the collapse. That graph does not signal collapse. That graph looks very.
I remember
good for Putin. Yeah,
I was in Moscow and walking around, and everybody in the Telegram chat and everything were, Moscow's. Talking about burning fires and just I was on Arbat Street. It was just like, panic. There ain't no panic. I mean, the street was full of people just living their lives. No panic, no running, just people living their life. And this is the reality of it. Like anything, people get tired of it. Right? To pretend that the war is not having an impact on the Russian economy is absurd. Of course, it's having an impact on the Russian economy. And to pretend that after 4+ years of war that people aren't tired of it, of course they're tired of it. And if I go to a cafe and talk to people, they're going to tell me they're tired of this war. Do they want the war to end? Who doesn't want the war to end? I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so on any given day, you can have people go, Vladimir Putin's not doing a good job. Uptick on the Vladimir Putin disapproval rating. I don't know. I watched Ksenia Sobchak the other night, and I've decided I'm against Vladimir Putin. Oh, damn! It goes down to 79%. But Ksenia Sobchak, I did a 3-hour interview with her that she still hasn't aired. Ksenia, what's going on? Call me if you have a problem. We can sort it out. I think she tried to ambush me, and it didn't work. But she's somebody who has embraced the anti-Putin narrative. She's not in support of this war. And she tried to create the impression that many people in Russia weren't in support of this war, that mothers throughout Russia were hesitant to send their sons off to fight and die. Well, what mother isn't hesitant to send their son off to fight and die? But I think most Russian mothers identify with the Motherland Calls, the statue at the Kurgan Mamayev, where the mother Russia is telling the sons to go forward and fight the fascists. The Russians understand what's going on here. They know what the stakes are, and Russians will defend Russia. And the Donbass is Russia, and Zaporozhye is Russia, and Kherson is Russia. It's populated by Russians, and Russians will defend Russia. There's a handful of people who, still believe in the time when the West provided the shining city on a hill for the Russians to aspire to be like, people like Gilbert Doctorow, who brought in their Western technology and their Western business practices, and they made the Russians kneel in subservience to the wisdom of these all-knowing Westerners. Those days are over. The West no longer holds any sway over the Russian people, and people like Ksenia Sobchak are out of time. But again, Russia doesn't have any free speech. Well, Ksenia Sobchak certainly can get up there and say the crap that she says, and says it regularly. She worked for RAIN TV, which is, an opposition-funded organization. There's plenty of dissenting voices in Russia today. That's one of the reasons why people like Gilbert Doctorow, resonate here in the West, because they can echo off of certain chambers. But again, we just get down to the fact. At the height of the Ukrainian drone offensive, Vladimir Putin's approval ratings is 79%. What was George H.W. Bush's approval rating after he won Desert Storm? Was it close to 79%? My point is, people literally don't know what the hell they're talking about. They really don't know what the hell they're, and you won't know unless you go to Russia. Go. It's not illegal. Get a damn passport, go to the consulate office, pay $180. They'll give you a visa, and go. Police state ain't going to grab you at the airport. Taxi driver will try to drive you into Moscow. Bring cash. Can't use credit cards yet, but it's affordable. The people are nice, and oh gosh, you can't leave Moscow or St. Peter. Yeah, you can. Travel. Don't try to go to the special military operation without permission. They will stop you at the border. But it's a war zone after all. But you can go to Volgograd, you can go to Kazan, go to Chechnya. Hell, go to Grozny. They have a great restaurant there. Go to the 3rd floor. They have great chicken soup. It's good stuff. Russia is a great country, and people need to see it to believe it. But stop listening to the naysayers. Stop listening to the propagandists. Vladimir Putin said it right. It's difficult right now. But it doesn't mean, difficult doesn't mean it's over. Difficult doesn't mean you're losing. Difficult just means it's not easy anymore. Difficult means you gotta change what you're doing. You gotta adapt. Russia is populated by the people who are more capable of adaptation than anybody else in the world.